So hi there, and welcome to another episode of our Caregiver series. Here today with us, we have Usha, and I'll pass it over to her to introduce herself to start.
My name is Usha Tewari, and I am a caregiver to my mom, who's been diagnosed with dementia. In addition to caring for her, I have a full-time job, and I'm also an advocate for the Alzheimer's Association. I advocate for state and federal legislation for caregiver Alzheimer's and dementia awareness. I'm also co-chair for the Greater Orlando Walk for the Alzheimer's Association. And also, since awareness is very important for me and everyone's story is unique, and in hopes of helping others, I have a blog and I have a podcast called The Indian Caregiver.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so I'll start with my first question, and that is, how long have you been a caregiver? And if you feel comfortable, can you walk us through the diagnosis experience and what it was like for the both of you at the start and kind of progressing through?
Um, I've been a caregiver for at least 7 years now, 6, 7 years. I feel like it's been longer. Just to back up a little bit, my father was a physician, a gastroenterologist. He suddenly passed away about 22 years ago. So since then, about a few years after my father's diagnosis, my mom started displaying a lot of symptoms, which we thought were mental health, in the sense depression, after losing my father very suddenly, and, kind of like schizophrenia and stuff. So kind of went through that process, not understanding or knowing what Alzheimer's or dementia is. And the general public thinking it's an elderly disease, since my mom at that time was in her 50s. So I think eventually, fast forward with time, my mom had an incident where she suddenly blanked out and passed out on the floor, and she had to go to the hospital. And when they did the MRI, that's when the physicians indicated that she's got dementia. And it was very stressful because I didn't know what it was and what to expect. I'm more used to cardiac and stomach, where you take a medicine and you start feeling better. But this has just been a very stressful, challenging, and eye-opening experience as a caregiver. As far as for my mom, she doesn't understand what's going on. She can't walk and obviously do her activities, so she is pretty much dependent on me. She has a walker, and I don't. And it's a personal decision. Some people may not agree with me, but I don't tell her a lot, because then it's going to worry her. And as it is, she's got anxiety. So I try to, as her caregiver and daughter, I just try to make it as normal as possible. So that way she doesn't stress, because I know she's going through a lot of changes in her body, which she doesn't understand and get frustrated with.
Definitely. Thank you so much for your answer. It sounds like you have a lot of great experience. To lead into my next question, then, can you describe what a regular day of your caregiving routine would kind of look like today, and how you manage all of your tasks? I know you have a lot on your plate, so just curious to hear how you do all of that.
On a good day, which I was having a lot of, and lately with the challenges, basically on a good day, I would feel like it's a misdiagnosis, because I can have a conversation with her despite the physical, challenges. There is the sundowning certain times, and I've learned a lot to pivot and see what works for me. But lately, it's been a bit more challenging. Unfortunately, she's been developing a lot more UTI. So when she does that, she becomes more delirious and hallucinate. And that just becomes so challenging for me that I can't do anything. Like, for example, I took, since Friday I've been off, and I took this week off after a long time, since December 2019. And I was just looking forward to catching up with things and doing things that I wanted to do just locally, because I can't even travel. I don't have, someone to care for her while I'm away at night. Um, but just the UTI made her so delirious that I just was not sleeping. Every 2 hours, she was waking me up. She thought she was dying. At one point, day before yesterday, I had to call 911 because, when it comes time to neurological and, cardiac, I, don't play games with that. So it's just been super stressful for me that I feel like I need another week off just to kind of start over and hit the reset button. But just coordinating her care, calling the doctor, keeping an eye on the symptoms, seeing if things change, simple things like constantly taking her temperature. So that's what my life has been like the last, especially 48, 72 hours.
Yeah, I can imagine. It sounds like a lot. I mean, I guess self-care is something that often is put to the back end, especially when there's so much on your plate. So I guess then the next question would be, what does your self-care routine look like, and what kinds of things would you recommend to other caregivers for self-care? And even though there's so much to juggle, what kind of stuff do you do for yourself when you can and when you have time?
I used to be so disciplined and, I was on a routine, because I like to invest in myself because seeing how my mom has challenges cognitively and physically, I want to do what I can to, prohibit that from happening to the best of my ability in the future. But self-care has been a challenge. I've put on weight, so I just don't feel good or have the confidence about myself like I used to. I go through so many clothes to see if it fits, what feels good. It's been so that I have, that challenge that I'm trying to overcome. My eating habits, I am very structured, but I'm not because there are a lot of times, like because she comes first, making sure I give her medicines or food, cook her food, that I just don't feel like by the time I'm done with her, 7:30 p.m. or so, I just don't feel like eating. So I've really neglected myself in some areas. So I've been trying to, become better of that, whether it's writing it down or reminding me to do it or just forcing myself to do it. I do try to work out. I don't work out as often as I want to or I used to, but I'm at a point, even if I can get in 3 times a week, I'm happy. There's some things I used to become pre-COVID. I was doing my spinning classes, but after a while that got to me because I was just tired as a caregiver, constantly being on a schedule, rushing to make it to like a 6 a.m. class when I haven't slept well, that type of stuff. So I've just kind of taken on some stuff and doing it on my own, whether it's working out, with kettlebells on my balcony or going for a walk or, I love biking. So I've kind of picked up that hobby as well, and try to go biking as much as I can with friends and, overcome the fear of riding by myself. But my advice for other caregivers is don't be harsh on yourself because I'm a very structured person. And if things don't go right, then I beat myself internally. But you just go with the flow, even if you get 20 minutes in, or if it doesn't happen, with time it'll happen. And there's some days where you can do more things for yourself than you can for other days. But just, I guess my main advice is that invest in yourself now because being a caregiver, your health declines very quickly and rapidly, more so in others. So even just 20 minutes a day doing something that you enjoy or taking care of yourself will make a difference.
Definitely, even the small moments matter, just like you said. Thank you so much for that. And then I guess I'll lead in with my other question. It's kind of a bit twofold. So, if you had to compare your caregiving experience overall since you've become a caregiver, what would you say has been the most challenging aspect? But at the same time, can you speak to any rewarding aspects that you might have experienced as well?
I think the challenging for me is the financial and the time. Financial in the sense is that the money, that extra that I used to save, is being used towards caregiver expense, and they're very expensive. So that's basically depleting the money that I was putting away monthly in my IRA. I'm no longer able to do that because everything for me, my focus is my mom, even just supplies, like adult diapers, pads, you know, stuff like that you don't think about, it adds up very quickly and you don't realize how expensive they are. So I spend about 150 to 175 a month just on supplies, and that doesn't include, caregiving. So that's been a very huge frustration for me, the financial aspect, because it's also hard to find people who are reliable and who care and who understand the dementia aspect, because you can't just pull anyone off the streets. There's some people who are not as polished and refined. So I think that's my biggest challenge. I think rewarding has been not only spending time with my mom, but I think also I'm learning more about myself, going outside my comfort zone, because you're having to balance a lot of things. For me, it's work, so obviously that's a priority. Every day during the work week, and there are times where I really have to assess: is this really important to me, or do I really need to do it? Because I realized, especially this past year with COVID, that my time is just as valuable. And whatever little time I have, I don't want it to be dictated by others, or for the sake of, going to a wine tasting or a networking event. I can use that time with my mom, because I realize that, her memory is up and down and she's up and down, that I would rather cherish those moments than just, keep myself busy. I don't want to say unnecessarily, but packed schedule. So I think that in itself has been rewarding, because I'm learning more about myself and gaining more confidence, to be myself, and to say no to things that are trivial in life.
Definitely very well worded. Thank you so much for that thoughtful answer. So those are the 4 questions that I had. I'm going to pass it over now to Tenna, who can continue.
Thanks so much for those great answers. It's really great to hear your experience and just kind of get a feel for, everyone's experience is extremely different. So thank you for kind of sharing what you've been through. And I know some of those things are difficult to talk about as well. So what I wanted to ask you is, what are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned as a caregiver?
I would say is don't take things for granted. People say I'll take it day by day, or I'll do it tomorrow, put things off. I've learned in life that you may not have it tomorrow, or things may change, or, that opportunity may not be there. So it's important to kind of like seize the moment and do it, even despite how exhausted you are. Just don't take anything for granted.
That's great advice. I feel like for anything in life, not taking things for granted and just kind of like taking in the moment. So thank you for that. I also wanted to ask you what support resources or other tools you use to help you through the caregiving process, and if there's anything you would also recommend to others that you found useful.
Yes, there are actually 3 resources. Obviously, the Alzheimer's Association. What motivated me to give back to them as a volunteer was their 1-800 number. I don't have the 800 number in front of me, but it's a 24/7 number where you can call when you've got questions or challenges or need someone to talk to. And I reached out to them maybe 5 years ago because my mom's hallucinations were so bad. I didn't know what to do or how to handle it, because we were beating heads. And so I called that number. I was hesitant to, because I'm like, oh no, I don't need help. But I did. And that was the best thing that I did, because they talked to me for over an hour and gave me advice, to change the subject, to do this. And it works, whatever they gave me. And what I also liked is their special touch is that they sent me the resources, the PDF files, while I was on the phone, to make sure I received it in my email. So they did not, just hang up and say, okay, bye, nice talking to you, call back. So they were on the phone, they spent the time. So I would highly recommend the Alzheimer's Association, the 800 number, because you never know when you've got an issue. I've called them 11:30 at night on a Saturday, reached out to them. The second one is the Rosalind Carter Institute for Caregiving. I found them through the Hilarity for Charity website. And I used them last year. I reached out to them when my mom was in the hospital for a month and she had a lot of mobility challenges that I was overwhelmed. And when you're in the hospital, doctors give a grim diagnosis, oh, the stages and stuff. I don't believe in that because every day is different. My mom can be good for a few weeks and then suddenly I have 1 week where it's pure hell for me. So I didn't know how to cope with it because I was in that environment that kind of brought me down tremendously. So I applied to have a counselor assigned to me. And I forgot how long the program was. It could have been 3 to 6 months. I did the program one-on-one where they sent me a huge manual and we went by it and gave me tips as a caregiver for self-care, what to do, whether it was stretching exercises, listening to music and stuff. And, even to secure my mom more, they gave some tips and stuff. So I went through that. That was a free program and the Alzheimer's Association's free as well, one-on-one. So that helps. And then the last one I use is the Hilarity for Charity support group. The problem with the support groups pre-COVID was a lot of them were during lunch or during work days, and I couldn't take time off to go to a care support group, especially for 2 hours. That's opposite side. And in the evening hours, even pre-COVID, I can't leave my mom unattended to, take off. So these online resources have really helped me, and I took advantage of it this past year. So we have a virtual caregiver group through Hilarity for Charity, I believe, every other week. And sometimes it's the same people. So you kind of learn tips and give advice. And you realize that you're not alone. And in some cases, some people are getting new into the process, or some people are more experienced. So those are the three things that I use that have helped me, especially this past year.
Thanks so much for sharing. Those are such great resources. And I feel like that's a really good point you brought up, that people can't really go to in-person support groups, if it doesn't fit their schedule and if people are working. So I think the online resources are very, very beneficial. I actually wanted to also go into another question about, and if you're comfortable talking about, caregiver burnout. You mentioned you're taking a week off to kind of just like get back to yourself, have some more time to complete things you may not have had time to kind of regularly go through, right, in your regular everyday life with your job and all these different commitments you have. So would you be willing to kind of talk about a bit about your experience with caregiver burnout and kind of just the strategies you use to cope with it?
Yes, caregiver burnout is real. I try to do as much as I can on my own because, as much as people say they're there for you, I hate saying this, but they're not, if you reach out to them on a text, hey, how are you doing? Let's meet up, you don't hear back. So it gets, that brings me down very easily, but I'm fortunate that I've got, the friends I can count on one hand who are always there for me and reaching out. But the caregiver burnout, I mean, I just experienced it. For example, Sunday, I've got a hospital bed for my mom. And that's my security for her, because if I want to go out for a few hours, I know there are railings. I know she's not going to fall. At least you would think she's not going to fall. But because she can't control her lower body yet sometimes, she somehow wedged herself in between the railings, that I was scared that she could have, if she would have moved further, she could have crushed her, choked herself. And I just, I got upset with her, and I know she wasn't feeling well. I said, Mom, you should not be doing this. And she's not understanding. She's trying to bite me and kick me and stuff, frustrated, not knowing what I was trying to do. And then I went out a few hours later. I called my best friend and I said, listen, I'm going through this. I just, expressed my frustration and took a, photo. So, I talked to her and then I felt better. And then I went out a few hours later for dinner with my friend who's also a caregiver, and something was telling me, just come home. And it was like 8:30 at night after we finished, and she was in that same situation. And that was the first time where I just felt like I gave up. Like, I feel like no matter what I tried to do, she's not understanding. I'm trying to do it for her safety. And granted, I know she didn't understand, but I think that's where it takes a toll on me when I do things that, will benefit her and make her for her well-being, and she just doesn't understand and just becomes, abusive. But there are times where, also lately, these last few months on the weekends, I just don't lift a finger for anything. I just want to stay in bed and not deal with anything. Because I'm just so wiped out. And I realize it then when Monday starts. I'm like, oh, I did a weekend where I didn't do anything. So I kind of feel guilty. But like I said earlier, I started a blog and podcast, and I just do it whenever I can. And I realize now not to put too much, on myself, because I can't function. I just, I take naps during the day when I'm, not at work. I just lose interest in things. And then that's when I realize that, okay, I need to snap out of it, listen to some music, and just move in some way to, get myself active again and motivated. And that usually helps me.
Thanks so much for sharing that experience with us. Yeah, I guess it's quite difficult to find a balance between finding time for yourself and then you feel guilty having that time for yourself. So finding that balance, I'm sure, is quite difficult for sure.
Yeah.
So the next question is a little bit different. It's more about technology and what kind of role you see it playing in the caregiving experience. I know we talked a bit about online resources. Do you use any kind of other forms of technology in your own caregiving experience?
For caregiving, besides, social media, I do have a camera, where when my mom was good, when she didn't have the hospital bed, to keep an eye on her to make sure she didn't fall and stuff like that. But as far as, apps and stuff, that I haven't come across any. Or at least I didn't several, months ago, but I see that's on the horizon now in the caregiving world.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like a lot more resources are becoming available slowly, but it is more recent development, of course. And the last question is about our app. Did you have a chance to download it? And do you have any kind of feedback and what you do like about it, and potentially anything that you would improve upon?
I downloaded it and I looked at it, very briefly. I like the emojis, to talk, about the moods and stuff, because I try to track it myself. That way, I think the moods are important because the way that I do it is when I go, when I have to see her doctor, I try to keep a journal and the moods, what, me as a patient, as a caregiver, because I've got hypertension and, blood pressure issues. So what triggers it and what particular behaviors. So that's the reason why I believe in that, because it's a way of self-care for yourself. And it's also potential data for your physician, because a lot of physicians, I read, they don't ask whether you're a caregiver or not. I'm fortunate because my mom and I go to the same physician. So, it's kind of like dual roles, but a lot of people don't do that or may not be open about it. So, my thing is with, your app with those moods, it kind of, and I haven't played it, done it in depth and stuff, but, that's what I would use it for, to see, okay, if I was feeling frustrated or angry, what triggered that, and, how long did it last for and stuff.
Definitely, yeah, I can see how that would be helpful. I feel like the report would also be helpful for you to kind of have that all for your physician and be able to kind of share that with them and anyone else you may need to share it with. But thank you for checking out the app, and we can't wait to hear any further feedback you do have when you kind of further dive into it. But thank you so much. It was so great meeting you. And we hope you stay tuned for our next caregiver interview in our series. Thank you so much
for having me, and I look forward to using your app and, learning more.